I survived 8 hours in a swamp while their dogs died trying to find me. The handlers filed a report after that hunt. It's still in the courthouse records in South Carolina. It says, 2 dogs lost. 1 dog refused service. Subject not recovered. What it doesn't say is how a field slave with no resources broke tracking dogs that had never failed before. They released 3 hounds at first light. Bred for this, trained for this. They'd caught every runner they'd ever chased. I had a 20-minute head start and one advantage they didn't know about. My father taught me how animals track before they took me from my homeland. I ran toward water, not away from them, toward the one thing that could steal my scent. 8 hours later, 2 of their dogs were dead. The third refused to search anymore. The handlers went back and told their bosses the swamp was too difficult. They blamed the terrain. They blamed the heat. They blamed everything except the truth. The truth was, I knew something the system didn't expect slaves to know, and that knowledge made me uncatchable. They hunted me for 23 years after that scent. New dogs, new handlers, posted rewards. I stayed free because I broke their certainty the first time, made them doubt their tools, made them wonder if the next runner would also know the water trick. So I'm asking you now, if one man with childhood knowledge can break the system's best tools, what does that say about the system's power? And if they had to hunt me for 23 years because I survived 8 hours, doesn't that prove their control was always more fragile than they claimed? They released the dogs at first light. I heard the chains drop before I saw them. Metal hitting dirt, then the handlers' voices sharpening into commands. Then the sound that makes every runner's blood freeze, hounds baying, picking up scent, beginning the chase that almost never ends well. I had maybe 20 minutes head start, maybe less. I ran toward water, not away from the plantation, not toward distance or speed, or the foolish hope of outrunning animals bred for exactly this purpose. I ran toward the swamp 2 miles east, toward brackish water and thick vegetation, and the one advantage I had over dogs and handlers, I knew something they did not expect me to know. This knowledge came from my childhood, from a place they tore me from when I was 11 years old, a place with different forests, different predators, different rules for survival. My father had been a hunter. He taught me how animals track, how scent travels, how water disrupts, what noses follow. The handlers did not know this. They saw a field slave running. They expected panic, exhaustion, inevitable capture. They expected the script to play out the way it always did: chase, corner, return, punishment. I was going to give them something different. The barking found my trail within minutes. The sound changed when they caught my scent, went from searching to certain. The baying intensified, became focused, urgent. They knew where I was going now. They were coming fast. I was running through scrubland, my feet hitting packed earth, my lungs pulling hot air. The sun was barely up, but already the heat was building. Sweat ran down my face, my back soaking through my shirt. I could hear the dogs clearly now, maybe a quarter mile behind. Closing distance. I angled my path, broke the straight line, cut across dense brush that would slow them fractionally, that would force the handlers to navigate obstacles. Every second mattered. Every yard of distance was survival measured in moments. The mud started when I was half a mile from the swamp. The ground went soft under my feet. Each step required more effort. My boots made sucking sounds as I pulled them from the muck. My pace slowed whether I wanted it to or not. Behind me, the baying grew louder. I could hear the handlers now too, voices shouting to each other, coordinating, confident. They had done this before. They knew how it ended. But I had done something like this before too. Different country, different predators, same principle. I reached the edge of the swamp as the sun cleared the trees. Brackish water stretched ahead, dark and still. Insects swarmed in clouds above the surface. Reeds grew thick along the margins. The smell was heavy decomposition, stagnant water, life and death mixing in the heat. I waded in without hesitation. The water was warm, almost body temperature. It rose to my knees, then my thighs, then my waist. The bottom was soft, uncertain. My feet sank into mud with each step. I moved upstream against the sluggish current. This was deliberate. Dogs track by following the strongest scent. Moving upstream meant my scent would not carry downstream to where they entered the water. Behind me, I heard the dogs reach the swamp's edge. The baying changed, went from certain to confused. The lead dog was whining now, circling at the water's edge, not wanting to enter. The handlers were cursing, commanding the dogs forward, threatening them. I kept moving. The water was chest deep now. Reeds brushed against my face. I pushed through them, creating the smallest wake possible, trying not to disturb the surface more than necessary. The dogs entered the water. I heard the splashing, heard the handlers following, heard the confusion in the barking as the dogs tried to pick up my trail through water that scattered scent in every direction. I remembered my father's voice. Water steals smell, but it does not erase you. You must become part of the water. Move like it moves. Stay where scent cannot gather. I submerged myself to the neck, moved along the reed line where shadows were thickest, breathed slowly through my nose, controlling the sound, controlling my presence. The barking spread out. The dogs were searching now, not tracking. They had lost the certainty of my trail. The handlers were shouting more, arguing with each other, pushing the dogs in different directions. I stayed perfectly still. This was the hardest part. Every instinct screamed to keep moving, to increase distance, to run while they were confused. But movement created disturbance. Disturbance meant sound and scent and visual detection. Stillness was survival. The sun climbed higher. The heat intensified. Insects found me despite the water. They landed on my face, my neck, any exposed skin. I did not swat them. I breathed through the discomfort. The dogs passed within 30 feet of me. I could see them through the reeds. 3 hounds, lean and muscular, trained for this work. They were swimming in circles, noses up, trying to catch something they could follow. The handlers were visible too. 2 white men on horseback, moving carefully through the shallow water, watching the dogs, watching the tree line, watching everything except the reed bed where I remained motionless. One of them said, "They lost him." The other said, "They don't lose. Keep pushing them." I'm telling you, they lost the scent. Look at him! So we wait. He has to move eventually. They were right. I could not stay here indefinitely. But I could stay longer than they expected. Longer than the dogs could maintain intensity. Longer than their confidence could hold. Time became the weapon. Hours passed. The dogs grew tired. Their searching became less systematic, more random. They were swimming but not tracking, moving but not finding. The handlers grew frustrated. Their voices sharpened. They blamed the dogs, blamed each other, blamed the swamp for making this harder than it should be. I stayed hidden. The water chilled my legs despite the heat. Numbness crept up from my feet. My muscles cramped from staying motionless. But I had learned endurance from a childhood fever that almost killed me. I had learned that the body can tolerate discomfort longer than the mind believes possible. Night approached. The light began to thin. Shadows stretched across the water. The insects intensified their assault. The handlers conferred. I could hear fragments of their conversation through the reeds. Getting dark. Should have had him by now. Dogs are spent. One of them made a decision. He called the dogs back. They gathered near the horses, panting, exhausted. Even from my hiding place, I could see their tongues hanging, their bodies sagging. But the handlers did not leave. They made camp at the swamp's edge, built a small fire, settled in, to wait. This was strategy. They believed I was still in the swamp. They believed darkness would force me to move. They believed they could wait me out. They were partially right. Darkness did change things, but it changed things in my favor. When full dark came, when the moon was just a sliver giving almost no light, I began to move again, slowly, carefully, using sound as a guide. The handlers were talking near their fire. The dogs were resting. I moved away from both, deeper into the swamp, using the night as cover. The water here was deeper. I had to swim in places. My clothes dragged at me, heavy and water. My boots were lead weights, but I kept my head above water, kept my breathing quiet, kept moving. I found a hollow beneath an overhanging bank. Cypress roots created a small cave at the waterline. I wedged myself into it, my body half submerged, my head protected by roots and earth above. This would be my shelter until morning. The night was loud. Frogs called from every direction. Insects hummed in clouds. Water birds made sudden splashing sounds. The swamp was alive with noise that would mask any sound I made. I allowed myself to rest. Not sleep was dangerous, but rest. I let my muscles relax fractionally. I let my mind slow its racing, but I kept listening. Around midnight, I heard the handlers wake the dogs, heard them trying to restart the hunts. The dogs were reluctant. One of them yelped when a handler struck it with something. Another whined constantly. They pushed the dogs into the water again. The barking was different now. Half-hearted, confused. The dogs were broken. They had been working for nearly 20 hours with no success. Their training said they should have found me by now. The failure was undermining their certainty. I listened as they searched, as they passed near my hiding place without finding it. As the hours stretched and their efforts grew more desperate, one of the dogs went silent. Just stopped barking. I heard a handler cursing, heard splashing as he went to find it. The dog was floating dead or dying. I could not tell which, but it was done. The second dog stopped shortly after, refused to continue. No amount of commanding or threatening would make it search anymore. Only one dog remained active, and even that one was moving slowly, mechanically, without real conviction. Dawn began to lighten the sky. I heard the handlers arguing. "This is wrong. I know it's wrong. We should have had him 10 hours ago. I know. The dogs are gone. 2 down, 1 useless. We keep looking. For how long? Until we're dead, too." A long silence. Then, pull back. "We'll report." He made it deeper than we thought. "We'll bring fresh dogs tomorrow." They were giving up. Not permanently, not officially, but they were retreating, admitting temporary defeat. I stayed in my hiding place as they gathered what was left of their pack and moved back towards solid ground. Stayed hidden as their voices faded. Stayed motionless until silence was all that remained. Even then, I did not move immediately. This could be a trap. They could be waiting just beyond hearing, hoping I would emerge too soon. I counted time by the sun's movement, waited until it was fully up, waited until the swamp's morning sounds reached their normal rhythm. Then I carefully extracted myself from the hollow. My body was stiff, cold, despite the warm water, covered in mud and scratches and insect bites, but functional. I moved away from where the handlers had camped, moved deeper into the swamp, then began working my way around to higher ground on the far side. This took hours. Careful movement through water and marsh, avoiding open areas, staying in cover. By afternoon, I reached solid ground. I climbed out of the water and into dense forest. My clothes hung heavy. Water poured from my boots with every step. But I was out. I was alive. I was free. Or as free as any runaway slave could be, which meant temporarily outside their immediate control. Not safe, not secure, just elsewhere. I found a hollow tree and crawled inside. Let myself rest for real now. Let exhaustion claim me. When I woke, it was dark again. A full day and night had passed since I ran. I was 30 miles from the plantation by now. Maybe more. Even more. But distance was not safety. They would send more dogs, more handlers. They would expand the search. I needed to keep moving. But first, I needed to understand what I had done. I had outlasted their dogs, had survived the hunt that was supposed to end with my return in chains, had used knowledge from a childhood they thought they had erased when they stole me from my homeland. I had proven something they did not want proven, that their system had limits, that their tools could fail, that the hunted could become something other than prey. This knowledge was dangerous. More dangerous than running, more dangerous than the wounds on my body or the exhaustion in my bones, because if one slave could survive 8 hours in the swamp and break their dogs, others might try, others might succeed. The narrative of inevitable capture might crack, and cracks in the system's narrative were threats to its foundation. I sat in that hollow tree, alone in the dark, understanding what I had just made myself. Not free, not safe, just dangerous enough to hunt until dead. I stayed in the forest for 3 days, moving at night, hiding during day, eating whatever I could find, roots, berries, bark, when nothing else was available, drinking from streams, staying away from roads and houses and anywhere people might see me. On the 4th day, I heard dogs again. Different dogs, fresh pack, new handlers. The plantation had brought in reinforcements. I ran, not toward water this time. The swamp trick would not work twice. They would expect it now. They would bring different tools, different strategies. I ran toward higher ground, toward rock formations where scent would not hold, toward terrain that would exhaust dogs faster than it exhausted me. The chase lasted 6 hours. I used every technique I knew, crossed streams, climbed through rocky areas, doubled back on my own trail, created false paths by dragging my feet in one direction, then stepping carefully in another. The dogs followed, but slower than the first pack, more cautious. The handlers had told them what happened to the first group, had warned them this runner was different. Fear was working in my favor now. I lost them near a cliff face, climbed 20 feet up using cracks in the rock, wedged myself into a crevice where the angle made it impossible to see me from below. The dogs stopped at the base of the cliff, barked upward. The handlers searched the area, but they could not find where I had gone. After 2 hours, they moved on. I stayed in the crevice until dark, then climbed down and kept moving. 2 weeks passed like this, running, hiding, surviving. Each time they sent dogs, I found new ways to break the trail. Each time they thought they had me cornered, I found routes they did not expect. I was not smarter than them. I was not stronger. I was just desperate in ways they could not match, and desperation creates innovation, when innovation is the only alternative to death. On the 15th day, I stole clothes from a farmhouse. Clean clothes, free man's clothes. I buried my slave clothing under rocks. I washed in a creek until the worst of the dirt and smell was gone. Then I started walking roads instead of hiding from them. This was risk, but it was calculated risk. I looked like a free black man traveling. My papers would not survive inspection, but most people did not inspect. Most people saw what they expected to see. I walked 50 miles over 4 days, through small towns, past plantations, along roads where people passed without looking twice. I was hiding in plain sight now, using their assumptions against them. Free blacks existed. Free blacks traveled. Free blacks were unremarkable enough to ignore. This worked until it did not. A sheriff stopped me outside a town in Georgia. He asked for my papers. I told him they were stolen. He asked where I was from. I gave him the name of a city 200 miles away. He asked my business. I said I was looking for work. He studied my face, my hands, looking for signs of field labor. Looking for evidence that I was property rather than person. I had been careful, had kept my hands wrapped to hide calluses, had practiced speaking without the accent that marked me as plantation rape. He was suspicious, but uncertain. He told me to wait. He went to check something. I walked away, not running, just walking, like I had somewhere to be, and his questions were making me late. He shouted after me. I kept walking. He did not follow. He was alone. I was moving into a crowded street. Chasing me would cause a scene, and he was not certain enough to cause a scene. But he would report it, would describe me, would send word to nearby counties that a suspicious man was traveling. I needed to change direction again. I headed east toward the coast, toward ports where people came and went without as much scrutiny, toward cities large enough to disappear in. 3 months after I ran from the plantation, I reached Charleston. The city was huge, thousands of people. Free blacks and slaves mixed together in markets and docks and streets. No one knew everyone. No one could track everyone. I found work loading ships, the kind of labor that paid daily in cash and asked no questions. I rented a room in a boarding house that catered to sailors and day laborers. I became one more body in the machinery of commerce. But I was not safe. Safety did not exist for runaways. It was temporary absence of immediate danger. Nothing more. 6 months after reaching Charleston, I saw a notice posted at the dock. It was a runaway advertisement. My description, my approximate age, a reward for my return. The plantation had not forgotten, had not stopped looking. They were still circulating my information, still hoping someone would recognize me and collect the bounty. I left Charleston the next day, headed north, through the Carolinas, through Virginia, working as I went, moving before people could notice patterns, before familiarity could turn into recognition. I reached Philadelphia 18 months after I ran. The city had a large, free black population, communities that helped runaways, churches that asked no questions, organizations that provided false papers and safe houses and routes further north. I found work in a shipyard, found a room, found people who understood that my past was not for sharing. But the dogs still came. Not real dogs, not anymore, but the fear of them, the sound of barking that lived in my memory, the certainty that eventually someone would recognize me, report me, send me back to the system I had escaped. I lived with this fear for 7 years. Then the war came. News spread through the free black community like fire. The North was fighting the South. The fight was about slavery, about whether it would expand or die. We did not know how it would end, but we knew it changed things, made the system uncertain, made the future unpredictable. I stayed in Philadelphia, worked, waited, watched. When the war ended, when Lincoln declared slaves free, when the news reached us that the system had broken, I did not celebrate. I walked to the docks, stood looking at the water, thinking about this swamp 23 years ago, about the 8 hours that broke their dogs, about the moment I proved their tools could fail. The system had ended, but the memory had not. I still heard the baying sometimes, still woke in the night thinking handlers were coming, still felt the water rising to my chest, the mud pulling at my feet, the insects swarming. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. I am an old man now. I live in a small house in Philadelphia. I work occasionally at the shipyard when they need extra hands. People sometimes ask about my life, about where I came from, about my history. I tell them I came north during the war, that I worked docks and ships, that I've made a life here. I do not tell them about the dogs, not because I am ashamed, but because the truth is complicated in ways that simple questions cannot hold. I ran because staying meant death of a different kind. I survived because I knew things the system did not expect slaves to know. I broke their dogs because I understood what they did not, that tools can fail when the target refuses to behave as predicted. But survival was not victory. Survival was just continued breathing, continued existence in a world that wanted me returned or dead. 23 years I ran. 23 years looking over my shoulder. 23 years waiting for the sound of baying to become real instead of memory. The system ended. The law changed. I am legally free now, recognized as human, able to own property and vote and move without papers. But freedom did not erase the chase. I still hear the dogs. I still feel the water. I still count hours in 8-hour blocks, measuring survival in increments that proved their certainty was wrong. This is what I want you to understand. They built a system that said capture was inevitable. They bred dogs specifically to track human scent. They trained handlers in the science of pursuit. They created certainty around the impossibility of successful escape. And I broke it. Not because I was exceptional, because I remembered something from before they owned me. Because I carried knowledge from a childhood they thought they had erased. That knowledge that water disrupts scent. That stillness defeats searching. That time can be a weapon saved my life, but it also marked me. Made me dangerous in their eyes. Made me worth hunting for 23 years. The dogs, they sent after me. 2 died that first night. 1 refused to work again. The system lost tools because I refused to be caught. This should have been my victory. This should have been proof that resistance works. But victory in bondage is not like victory in freedom. Victory in bondage is just, you are still alive. You are still yourself. You have not been returned to the place that would erase both. The handlers filed reports after that first chase. I learned this later from a man who worked in the courthouse. The report said the dogs failed. They blamed swamp conditions. They blamed poor training. They blamed everything except the truth. The truth was, a slave knew something they did not expect. And that knowledge made him uncatchable for 8 hours. 8 hours! That should have been impossible. 8 hours that broke their certainty. 8 hours that lived in their records as failure without explanation. They never admitted what really happened. Never wrote down that I survived by being smarter about terrain than their dogs were about scent. Never acknowledged that their system had a flaw. But they changed their procedures after me. Started bringing more dogs. Started training handlers in swamp pursuit. Started building contingencies around the possibility that runners might know things. I was not the first to run. I was not the last. But I was one of the ones who survived long enough to make them question their methods. That questioning was the real victory, not my freedom. That came decades later through war and politics and forces beyond my control. The real victory was making them uncertain, making them wonder if the next runner would also know water tricks, would also outlast dogs, would also break the tools they depended on. I'm telling this story now, late in life, because the dogs are gone, but the lesson remains. Systems build certainty around their tools. They invest in methods that have worked before. They create narratives about inevitability. But tools can fail. Methods can be defeated. Inevitability is a lie told to discourage resistance. I was a field slave with no education and no resources. All I had was memory of a father who taught me hunting, of a childhood in a place with different predators, of knowledge the system did not know I carried. That was enough. Not to guarantee freedom, not to make escape easy or safe or even likely to succeed, but enough to break their dogs, enough to survive 8 hours that should have ended in capture, enough to prove their certainty was performance rather than truth. The swamp still exists. The plantation is abandoned now, but somewhere in that brackish water, in that tangle of reeds and mud, there is evidence of the night I hid, while dogs searched and handlers cursed and time stacked into ours, that made the impossible briefly real. No one will find that evidence. The swamp has reclaimed it, but I carry it anyway, in my bones, in my sleep, in the way I still turn toward water when I feel trapped. The dogs are gone. The handlers are dead. The system collapsed, but I remember. And remembering is its own kind of resistance, the kind that says, they were wrong, their tools failed, their certainty broke, and I am still here to tell you how.